Ray, you got to go here in a minute, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I just quickly get your thoughts on Jose Aldo being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame?
I'm going to have two thoughts on this. My first thought is that I really believe that's what they should have did for Shogun Rua. That's what that would have been a nice retirement. Show his highlights, forget the fight. And if you're going to give the guy a fight, you make him the favorite against somebody. You don't give him a fight where he's the underdog and he's 45 years old. I don't get that. Like, what's the point of that? Go ahead.
Well, Ihor Potieria, if you look at the UFC's light heavyweight division, you can argue he's one of the lowest ranked fighters in that division, right? I think Brian Petrie acknowledged on our podcast last week that he had maybe one win over a fighter above 500 when he got signed by the UFC. Like, you're right. Potieria was a 2-1 favorite.
Right.
You're just thinking maybe somebody long in the tooth that I'm not thinking of that maybe would have provided a more level playing field. I don't know. I think they were kind of trying to get him a competitive fight. I don't know.
All right. But anyway, so that's that. But the Jose Aldo, come on, man. That had to bring a tear to your eye. Here's a guy, and Kenny shared the octagon with him, which is amazing because this is a guy that's been around forever that people did look up to. If you wanted to see devastating leg kicks, that's the guy you look for. If you wanted to see crazy knees, takedown defense, he was the guy. So, and again, another really nice guy, that really deserves this more than anybody. But, man, does his body of work speak for itself. Crazy. So that was a great moment. That's the way I like to see, even though it was a Hall of Fame and not a retirement. I'd rather see him shift to that where you show all those highlights and, you get people talking for 5 or 10 minutes and that's it. Call it a day. I don't want to see guys going out like that. It means, because we start rationalizing, well, at least he got the fight again. And even DC, like, we got to see him again. I disagree with that. And I don't want to, my thing with DC, I don't want to disagree with anything.
No, I get it.
I mean, John, you think if you actually tried to shove him, you could move him more than like a 16th of an inch? No, really, Kenny, the guy's arms are busting out of his suit. I'm like, this guy's a house. He's a house. He's a fucking house, this guy. What do you do with him, Kenny?
Yeah.
And the guy knows what he's doing. What do you do if that guy grabs you? What are you going to do? Yeah. You think you're surviving?
Well, Kenny taught him.
Politely, you have to ask him to let go of you. Yeah. No, listen, could I chime in about Jose Aldo, or are we going to say goodbye to Ray? Ray, do you got to go hold?
No, chime in about Jose, and then I'm out of here.
I was going to say this, and I'm sure Ray would agree with this. It's like, I don't care what organization, I don't care if you're fighting over an LFA or some small organization. If you were undefeated in this sport for 10 years, you're a G. That should be like, wow. I don't care. That's impressive. No mistakes. You perfect for 10 years. Congratulations.
And
that's amazing.
Kenny, you're a G, but he wasn't just undefeated. He was dismantling a lot of people.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have that. He was a world champion in this sport. He was an innovator. He was athletically superior to pretty much everybody out there. So he was doing things that other people just weren't doing. Like, people are learning from him. If you were just one of those things, you would be impressive.
Right.
He was all of those things.
And he carried a division that the UFC didn't even want. He carried that freaking division. He brought light to that division. So all these bantamweights and, featherweight, they owe it to Jose Aldo. He trailblazed that whole thing for those guys. And, man, did he do a great job of it.
You could also argue, I know this is a little bit of a push because Conor McGregor is a special individual who carries a lot of charisma and skill. But would Conor McGregor be Conor McGregor if he didn't have that win over Jose Aldo? It's like he gave that push to Conor McGregor. So, yeah.
Unbelievable. I agree
Jose
with you 100%.
Aldo had won 18 consecutive fights going into that meeting with Conor McGregor that, of course, lasted just 13 seconds.
A lot of guys don't get 18 fights in the UFC. This guy won 18 fights in a row.
I got to say, too, Ray, and we'll let you go, but our coordinating producer, Zach Candido, does listen to this podcast, and I think you might even have his wheels churning in terms of the Shogun Hall of Fame stuff, right? Because I think it's a little bit of a tricky navigation with the Hall of Fame when you get in for a fight. Diego Sanchez gets in for his fight with Clay Guida. Dan Henderson and Shogun Rua get in for their fight against each other. But I could sit here until I'm blue in the face and make modern era or pioneer era arguments to get into the Hall of Fame on their own individual merits for Shogun Rua, Dan Henderson, and Diego Sanchez. So I think that actually is a good idea, right? Like, as Shogun Rua is retiring last night, you do all the bells and whistles and you put him into the Hall of Fame. That would have been amazing.
No, that's the way to go, John. Trust me, as a fan, and a guy involved in the sport. I loved what they did for Jose Aldo. I thought it was his retirement, which it shouldn't be, but it was a great thing. That's where I came. Just a great thing if they would have did that to Shogun and pay him his money. Give him his money for the fight.
Yeah.
That's the way you go out in this organization. We have the money. We're going to put on a big spectacle for you with the highlights and interview people. Put it on. It brings a tear to people's eyes. Look what a Jose Aldo Hall of Fame guy's crying like a baby because of the excitement and just the joy of what that brought him. That's the way to go, Zach Candido. I promise you.
Yeah. Ray Longo, thank you so much. I know we sort of tweaked the time on you today, but you're an absolute soldier, and I always appreciate those texts on Fight Night. You have no idea, so thank you, man.
I love you guys, and I would do anything for you, but I got a bunch of maniacs looking through a window now trying to get me out of here.
Get out of here. Thank you.
This is why this team wins, because it's Sunday, and people should be on, but we're down here fucking grinding. Watch out for Nas on the 18th, baby. We're bringing it. I'll talk to you later.
Let's go. There he is. Look at fucking Ray Longo. I mean, that's how you outro yourself. Ray Longo Minute every week here on the Anik and Florian podcast. So later this week, we will talk about Ismael and Gabriel Bonfim, Bruno Fajeda on short notice, stepping in for Brad Tavares, and he knocks out Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez. A lot of great prelim performers. Jailton Almeida, of course. I want to get your thoughts on Johnny Walker over Paul Craig before we get to our final thoughts. These guys were entrusted with this main card pay-per-view opening slot. You knew it was probably going to be a quick fight one way or the other. But I think for Paul Craig, I have a lot of respect for the skill set, but, a little bit of it is kill or be killed. And, I don't know, just all of a sudden he went from having all this momentum and head-to-head wins against Jamahal Hill and Magomed Ankalaev. And now it's 2 successive losses, and he's not really in the mix at all. I want to talk about Johnny Walker, but overall thoughts on those two, that fight, and where they might stack up in the division now.
John, that last fight with Paul Craig, this highlights the importance of defense. It doesn't matter how dangerous you are in one area. If you can be killed easily, then you're doing it wrong. And I think that for Paul Craig, that's why we see these, highs and lows in his career, where he's either submitting you with something just fantastic, or he's getting knocked out with something fantastic. And that came with Johnny Walker. He stayed a little bit too close on that single leg. He wasn't mobile on that single leg. He wasn't really off balancing Johnny Walker too much. Johnny Walker's too powerful, too big, too dangerous to allow him any free shots. Yeah. And once he ate that first one, man, it was all downhill for him. So unfortunate. But on the other side of things, I think it was cool to see Johnny Walker fighting with way more confidence. It seems like he's been working hard on his game. He hasn't had perfect performances all the time, but it seems like he's settling into, a point in his career where he's kind of shored up some of those vulnerabilities. He's not a perfect fighter yet, but I thought that was a really good performance for him against a guy who is dangerous. So I thought he took advantage of that spot extremely well.